Thank you so much for this amazing, inspirational film about Christopher Reeve, but also about the concept of what is a Superman, what is a hero. Let's get into the. Oh, by the way, I wanted to congratulate this team because they have just come from the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, where they swept with 6 nominations and 6 awards. So it was Best Film, Best Director, Best Music, Best Editing, and
Biographical Documentary.
Best Biographical Documentary.
And Best Archival.
And, sorry?
Best Archival.
Best Use of Archive.
I feel ashamed that I know that, all of those.
It's amazing. And also, Ilan just won an award for his music. But I forgot what
the HMMAs, Hollywood
music.
Music in media.
Oh, yeah. Great. Congratulations. It's really, really quite wonderful.
Thank you.
So let's get into, there's so many things that I think that the general public has an idea of who Christopher Reeve was. But on the other hand, when you see this film, you discover that he was all that, but more, and a lot of surprising things. How did you get into the process of deciding to make this film about him, and how did it begin?
Actually, we would love this story to be, we had been working on it for 10, 15 years, but actually it's an archive producer who reached out to the family a few years back, and the family had been approached countless times over the last 15 years. Obviously, Chris passed away in October, 20 years ago, in October this year. But they mostly was fiction films that people approached them, and they always said no, they were not ready, they didn't like the approach. And when Daniel actually reached out to Matthew Reeve through LinkedIn, of all places, they were selling their family home. And they had all this vast archive, as well as, clothes and loads of other things. So there was a lot of time of memory and soul searching and thinking about maybe it's time for them to actually honor the father's memory. And I think that's the seed of the project, is actually with, thinking about them being ready and wanting the memory of the father to now being brought to a more contemporary audience, and not leaving too much time that people that have maybe grown up with Chris as Superman to just rekindle with the love of Chris. So that's how. And then Daniel started working with a production company in the UK called Passion Pictures, and that's when they got in touch with us. We had made a film about the Paralympic movement called Rising Phoenix with Passion, so we kind of knew each other. And because our first film was McQueen, which is a biopic about Lee Alexander McQueen, and then Rising Phoenix has got a major theme about disability. They felt we were probably the right people to do it, and we met the children, and
the rest is history. I mean, we were, as soon as it came up, it was a sort of a no-brainer for us for exactly that reason, that we felt in a way that the 2 previous films we'd made were sort of preparation to tell this story. And it's sometimes, we take a lot of time thinking about what our next project is going to be. We've made 3 films together now, and we don't rush into the first thing. But sometimes something is suggested where you just click immediately with the material. And I think this story from the get-go, because for me, I grew up with Christopher Reeve as Superman, and I remember seeing the first Superman film in a packed London West End cinema on its opening weekend, and so there was that side of it. And then we knew a little bit about his advocacy and his work with people with disabilities, and how he galvanized the scientific and medical community, and it just felt like a wonderful story to tell. One of those stories you kind of think, surely someone's done this before, and it hadn't really been done on film. So we just felt we had to. This was a story we had to tell.
One thing that really sticks out is the access to the family, and I wasn't aware of the the kind of blended family that he had, and also just the contribution of the children, and also of his wife and his ex-partner, Gay. But the film has a very intimate quality, and I think some of that also has to do with the material that you have. Can you talk about a lot of that material, which is home movie footage, as well as clips of the film? It's so varied and vast. How much material did you have? And Otto, the editor, had to wrangle all that, right?
Well, as you can see, there was an awful lot of footage, a lot of home video footage, a lot of kind of commercial archive where Chris was, kind of on talk shows and things like that. There was his film library, as in, all the films that he starred in, and then his eldest son actually filmed pretty much the final 4 years of his life almost every day, with the intention of making. Well, he did actually make one documentary called Hope in Motion, but also with the intention of making a second. So just with that footage alone, there was enough footage for 2 films. There was a lot to wrangle, but I think it also, having that amount of material, to me, is more exciting than daunting, because it provided us so many different opportunities and ways to tell the story in in a emotional and cute's the wrong word, but we could be playful, because there's a lot of trauma in this story, and there's a lot of kind of quite dark, heavy times. But I think because the nature of Superman being a comic book, I think there was and there's also a lot to celebrate within his life. We could be quite playful with the way that we use the material.
It's such such an intimate feel, not only from the family, but also his friends, the interviews with his friends. It's very surprising to see that the relationship between Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve, for instance, not that many people know that they were that close, but also that they really helped each other. And that one line that I think Glenn Close has, where, if he was alive today, Robin would probably be still around. That's a bit, when you heard that, that must have been quite a shock. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the film, because it's a little different. It's not a chronological look at his life. You kind of go back and forth between the pre-accident and the post-accident. How did you come to create that structure?
I mean, we from the get, when you do a biographical film, there is always that danger of going cradle to grave and being very episodic, and frankly, that's very boring. It's not an interesting way to wrangle all the elements of the film. So, when you look for a structure, you're looking for something that is really going to help you express the emotions that you feel in the film. That's what structure is all about. It's not a device that you impose on the story. It's something that hopefully is going to really, liberate you to make the film you really want to make. So with this, I think, this is something Ian talks about very well. That we kind of there was the
story called it.
Starting with the accident really was sort of like always something we had in our minds, and then to have 2 narratives, one after the accident and one before the accident, that would sort of, and for us the most important story was what happens after the accident, because that has a fantastic shape. Somebody waking up after having been in a coma to discover that they have lost all movement, that they may never walk again, that they will depend on a ventilator to breathe, and briefly entertains the thought of just switch off the life support. And I think that starting point, going from there to rediscovering a sense of a reason to live, and then finding a kind of a purpose, something to live for, not just in terms of his family and his friends and so on, but the larger purpose of the film, to sort of like try and move the needle and change things in the world, and take this area of science that was, as Dr. Kirschblum says, an area of doom and gloom in medicine, to take that and turn it into something that galvanizes the entire community. I mean, that's an extraordinary story to tell. Plus, he also goes back to work. So it's sort of like, it feels that felt like a very fulfilling story to tell. And then dotting in the past and opening up his life before the accident, just finding the right points to transition between the two. That was the big challenge, but that felt like a very natural structure.
And Peter's explanation is perfectly correct, but I think the seed of getting to this concept and idea and what we did came from, I'd say, two things. We read his book, and he had in his memoir and his autobiography, he had a bit used the same structure, so that inspired us to look at that in the first place. And there's one thing, like, and this is exactly it. Sometimes the story itself tells you what you do, what you have to do, and the fact that if we had told the story chronologically, there would have been a story of two halves. Chris on his standing and Chris after the accident, and we felt that was when we started looking at archive and we started to read more about it. There's one point in his life where he finally realized he's the same person before and after. It's just something that just happened to him, like it can happen to any of us. You know, same as a loss of someone or dark moments in our life or invisible disabilities with our mental health. But we're still the same person. And what we wanted to make sure is that we constantly had to remind the audience of the same person. And it was the third, actually, element that we discovered, that felt really maybe a bit hooky for some people, but the fact of what it means to be a hero on the screen as an encompassing Superman and someone that, you know, has got the virility and, you know, is this ultimate superhero, and then Chris trying to survive, and by pushing the needle, as Peter said, becoming a hero for others without him trying to do it, but because he constantly tried to push the narrative forward for disabled people, for the scientific community, he becomes the hero.
You kind of play with the dichotomy of Christopher Reeve, you know, either pre-accident, post-accident, also, you know, his personal life and also his image as Superman, and also the character of Clark Kent in Superman. But then it all comes together as like one thing, as his wife Dana says, you know, it's you, I love you, all of you, you're still the same you. And so that kind of totality kind of brings it all together. It's really beautiful. Ilan, let's talk about the music. It's so beautiful. And what was the process of the music in this film? Because there's so much emotion, and, you know, not only the joy, but the pain and the trauma.
For me, it's always, you have to start with a theme, with something that's going to sum up the character, and that's I think always the hardest thing. We played around with a couple of different ideas, and then settled on the theme that you just heard about over the titles at the end, and then there's a couple of other themes. There's a love theme, and another theme about inspiration. It's been, I really enjoy working with these guys because it's a very collaborative, you know, we sit around and we talk about the film, and I always think that writing music for picture, you have to, you're telling a narrative, you're telling the emotional narrative of the story, and you've got to think of yourself as a storyteller, not really as somebody who's making music, and so we get to work together on that and shape all of that together.
It's so beautifully woven together. You know, the film has a, you know, dare I say, indie kind of quality to it. I mean, can you talk about the production a little bit? Because, you know, it's Warner Brothers. big
Well,
movie,
it's not.
but it's,
They came begging.
No, I
seems-
mean, we made it independently. It's lovely that you say that. It was made absolutely independently and financed through with Words and Pictures. We actually had. It wasn't easy financing it. It was we thought this is going to be a no-brainer of everything that we've done, but actually, you know, I mean, times are difficult at the moment to raise finance generally. But you know,
It was already difficult 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was a really good lesson to see that actually you think you've got a big IP, you think you've got all of this, and actually, you know, already back then, 13, 14 people passed from the streamers. People always want to see something. They just think, you know, oh, Chris is, you know, he's a very, very old actor. Do people remember? Is he relevant? What are you going to do with it? What, you know, the new generation could go to it. I need my algorithm to touch people at the, you know, from 1 year old to 250 years old. So you've got all those things that people, you know, until they've seen a decent film, like I'm sure there's plenty of filmmakers in this room, they just don't trust you until you've got it showing at Sundance, basically.
So we eventually found the finance with Words and Pictures, a New York-based studio. They financed it completely. We had a good budget for it, but we didn't have a huge budget. And you know, the big worry was the big bad wolf of Warner Brothers. Would they give us the archive? Would they make our lives difficult? And so it's a wonderful sort of like irony that after they first saw the film at Sundance, they were immediately there for us and sort of like wanting to acquire the film for Warner. And it's not just Warner and it's not just DC Studios. There's also HBO and CNN. It's all of the Warner family came together for
Actually, we heard that it was mostly driven by CNN Films that saw the film and heard about the film and kept an eye, and they kept on telling everyone within the family, wow, you should keep an eye on it. And you know, but you know, DC is very busy with the next installment of what Superman should be. So in a way, we were just this little entity doing our thing. And, you know, there was, as producers on the film, it was really scary because the licensing didn't allow us to use any of Superman's imagery within the promotion of the film. We had issues, you know, you want to talk about 1 or 2 weeks before Sundance where you had to recreate one of the cues for the film because we were not allowed to use it.
Yeah, we were told we could only use so much John Williams, and we had to always have it in sync. So we'd actually, and this information came very, very late. So we hadn't recorded any other music. It wasn't one of the cues that Ilan had been asked to work on. So 2 weeks before Sundance, we called in a total panic. We called this man up, and
well, it was a really interesting scene. It's when they're trying to, they're talking about whether how are they going to make Superman believable flying, and the moment that Christopher turns and he banks and everybody cheers because they realise that the movie's going to work, and it had always had John Williams on it, and I think we all thought that worked really well. But and then it was of course incredibly daunting to have to try to replace John Williams. But it did a really interesting thing, which it ended up as an audience member. I think when you watch that now, because it doesn't have the John Williams in it and it has the Christopher Reeve theme on it, you're with that bit of the narrative. You're watching Christopher Reeve play Superman. And the scene works much better as a result, as opposed to if the John Williams had remained on there, then you just get sucked into the Superman film, and that's a very different experience.
And I think that's what you did brilliantly, Ilan, is to be able to, because of our narrative structure, where we had to come out from the Superman era into the modern day Christopher Reeve, you were able to, smoothly move into the two world, and I think that helps the editing as well. Like soundscape help you smoothing out some of our, more tricky
bumpy bits,
and that's the magic of cinema or movie making. It's every layer. Nothing is perfect until every creative collaborator puts their magic to it.
The difficult thing, I just want to just add, because it is an extraordinary sort of cue, is that this cue is an original cue. It's not just kind of like one of the other. Ilan had to repurpose, because he'd already recorded all the music. You had to repurpose elements of the music and build an entirely new cue out of it that worked with picture. I mean, amazing. It was amazing.
Well, it's just seamless and just so beautiful in that way. I mean, not only all the elements together, but also just want to mention that the 3D sculpture of Christopher Reeve I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but can you talk a little bit about that and what
So quickly,
what is that?
we've from the first collaboration we had with Peter, we tried to find a sort of visual identity that we can actually craft throughout the film, and we discovered that if we think about the title sequence and actually start seeding some of the themes of the film within the title sequence, we can actually use some of those sequences and extend them within the film. So the sculpture represents Chris being trapped in his own body. As a sculpture, he can't move anymore. And then the way we actually chose the pose was for two ways. If you look at the Chris going upwards, he's actually reaching for the sky. But if you actually flip your shot 180, or you look at him going down, it looks like he's actually trying to break his fall. So from one position, we could have two sort of use of it, the negative one as well as the positive, and then you put that with an amazing soundscape or Ilan's music, which gets you more into a glorifying or a hopeful, positive moment, or actually something dark and somber. Then actually the world he inhabits, the idea was inner space and outer space. Chris said, he tried to galvanize the scientific world. As Peter said before, he was one of the doom and gloom field of science, spinal cord. And he said, we've managed to conquer the universe. We conquered the inside ourselves to try to save ourselves. Many of our brothers and sisters, might have to end up their life in at the time, it's controversial, but diminished, and can we try to help them? So the idea was to look at spinal cord and visuals of the spinal cords and out of space, and try to create a world which combine a bit of both. The audience don't have to understand that exactly, but that's our inspiration. And then the planet were like stem cells, because the stem cell research that Chris pushed. So, and then kryptonite as well. That's some. Maybe a bit hooky sometimes, but we liked it. We felt he was interesting.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. We have so much to talk about, but unfortunately we've come to the end of our time. But I just want to remind the audience that the film is streaming now on Max, and you can see it. Please spread the word. And also you'll have an opportunity to speak with our panel at a reception following this. It's in theater next door. And I just want to thank our panel so much for this wonderful conversation. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming out. We know coming out in the cinemas is not always easy, but thanks you for coming, guys.